Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is Pro-Revenge Story. This happened back in 2015. I was 45 when this all went down, and I'm 53 now. After leaving my second career in corporate finance, I started doing property management. I purchased a 2,800 square foot luxury home in an upscale neighborhood, planning to rent it out. I had no idea how problematic the HOA would be until I became the owner. Everything I'm about to tell you happened over 2 years. The HOA president was notorious for finding issues with everyone in the neighborhood. Your garbage bins are visible from the street. Fine. That music is disturbing the peace. Fine. Did you get approval for that yard sale? Fine. Those new shrubs weren't in the approved landscaping plan? Another fine. It never stopped. The community could run for the HOA board, but the president was chosen by the board members themselves. 6 out of the 10 members were in her pocket, so she kept her position year after year. Her husband was a prominent surgeon at the local hospital, which meant they lived quite comfortably. Everyone in the neighborhood started calling her Queen Karen behind her back because of how she ruled over us with her HOA fines. I would visit monthly to collect rent in person since my tenants had become good friends. One evening, I was parked in their driveway and we were enjoying some music on their patio. It wasn't particularly loud, but suddenly we heard the whir of an electric golf cart. "Excuse me!" she shouted, stepping off her cart. "That music is completely unacceptable." "It's only 8 p.m., I replied calmly. "The bylaws clearly state music restrictions don't start until 10. "I don't care what time it is. Turn it down immediately." We didn't comply, and she stormed off, leaving me with a fine notice the next day. Unlike most residents who just paid up, I contested it at the next board meeting and won. That's when things got personal. She started scrutinizing everything about my property. "Your tenant's car leaked oil on the driveway." Fine. "The grass is a 1/4 inch too tall." Fine. "Those holiday decorations have been up for 25 hours too long." Fine. Some I fought successfully, others I had to pay, but she was making life miserable for my tenants too. One evening, while discussing the situation with my tenants over dinner, we noticed her rushing home in her robe around 9 p.m. As we watched from the kitchen window, a man who definitely wasn't her surgeon husband followed her inside. We started paying more attention and realized this wasn't a one-time occurrence. After gathering enough evidence, we made sure her husband found out. 3 months later, divorce papers were filed and he moved out. The neighborhood gossip mill went into overdrive when word got out that she received almost nothing in the settlement due to her infidelity. Her lifestyle took a visible hit. The luxury SUV was replaced with a used sedan, and her designer wardrobe gave way to department store clothes. But somehow, she maintained a comfortable lifestyle despite having no visible income. By early 2016, the fines and HOA dues had become ridiculous. Your trash bins were out 30 minutes too early. Fine. Your car needs to be washed. Fine. The community was fed up, so we confronted her at the next meeting. "The increased fees are necessary for community maintenance," she insisted, pointing to the annual budget report. "If you'd bothered to read it, you'd understand." We actually read the report this time instead of tossing it aside as junk mail. The HOA budget had mysteriously increased by 15%, but there were no visible improvements to show for it. When we demanded answers at her house, she simply said, "The board's decisions are final," and slammed the door in our faces. We filed a joint lawsuit, and by June, the truth came out. She had been embezzling HOA funds to maintain her lifestyle after the divorce. The fines and increased dues were funding her expenses since she refused to get a job. She was arrested and charged with fraud and extortion. Our lawsuit forced her to mortgage her house to repay the community. She served 4 years in federal prison, and while she was away, the bank foreclosed on her house. When she was released in 2020, she had nothing left. Most of us never wanted it to end this way. If she'd just been reasonable with the fines and actually gotten a job, things would have been different. But her pride and entitlement led to her downfall. The next one is an entitled people story. 3 years ago, I was just a normal guy with a normal house in a quiet suburb outside Denver. Now I'm the guy whose house got blown up by the police. Yeah, you read that right. The actual police department demolished my entire home and then tried to tell me it was for public safety. It all started on a Thursday afternoon in August. I was at work when my phone started blowing up with calls from neighbors. At first, I ignored them because I was in the middle of a big presentation, but when my sister called 3 times in a row, I stepped out to answer. "Your house is surrounded by SWAT teams," she practically screamed into the phone. "What the hell did you do?" I was completely confused. I hadn't done anything. I lived alone, worked a boring job in IT, and my most rebellious act that year had been forgetting to return my library books on time. "I have no idea what you're talking about," I told her. "Are you sure it's my house?" She was sure. She'd driven by after another neighbor called her. I immediately left work and raced home, only to be stopped about 2 blocks away by police barricades. Officers wouldn't let me through, wouldn't tell me what was happening, and basically treated me like I was a potential threat when I identified myself as the homeowner. After hours of waiting and getting nowhere with the officers at the scene, I finally managed to speak with a sergeant who informed me that they were responding to reports of an armed suspect who had barricaded himself inside my home. "There's nobody in my house," I told him. "I live alone. I've been at work all day. This is clearly a mistake." The sergeant just gave me this condescending look. "Sir, we have reliable information that a dangerous fugitive is inside. Please step back and let us do our job." I spent the next 6 hours standing behind police tape, watching as they brought in more tactical vehicles, officers in full SWAT gear, and even what looked like explosive experts. They used bullhorns to call out to someone inside my house. They deployed some kind of robot that went in through my front door, all while I kept insisting there was no one inside. As night fell, I heard the sergeant radio someone about final options and structural compromisation. Before I could even process what that meant, there was a series of explosions. Not small ones, huge, ground-shaking blasts that sent debris flying into the air. They blew up my house, my entire house. When the dust settled, where my 2-bedroom ranch home had stood was now just a smoking crater with some partial walls still standing. Everything I owned was either destroyed or buried under rubble. The worst part, after demolishing my home, they searched through the wreckage and found exactly what I'd been telling them all along. No fugitive, no weapons, nothing illegal at all, just the scattered, broken remains of my life. The police captain approached me with this half-apologetic, half-defensive look on his face. "We received credible intelligence that a dangerous suspect was inside. We had to take action to protect the public." "But there was no one there," I said, still in shock. "Better safe than sorry," he replied, and then had the nerve to hand me a card for the department's public affairs office, telling me to call them about next steps. Next steps? My house was gone. Everything I owned was gone. The only next step I could think of was finding a place to sleep that night. My sister took me in, and the next morning, I called the police department's public affairs office. They were sympathetic but unhelpful, telling me to file a claim with the city for damages. When I asked who had provided this credible intelligence about a fugitive in my home, they cited an ongoing investigation and wouldn't tell me. When I filed the claim with the city, I expected them to acknowledge their mistake and make it right. Instead, they offered me $5,000 for temporary displacement and suggested I use my homeowner's insurance for the rest. My insurance company wasn't much better. They informed me that my policy had an exclusion for damage caused by law enforcement in the line of duty. Apparently, the police can just blow up your house and nobody has to pay for it. That's when I knew I needed a lawyer. Finding an attorney willing to take on the city wasn't easy, but I eventually found a small firm that specialized in civil rights cases. My lawyer, Mia, was outraged when I told her my story. "This is a clear violation of your Fourth Amendment rights," she explained. "The police can't just destroy your property without compensation, even if they claim it's for public safety, especially when they were acting on faulty information." We filed a lawsuit against the city, the police department, and several individual officers claiming violations of my constitutional rights, negligence, and destruction of property. The response? They filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that the police had qualified immunity and were acting in good faith based on information they had received. What made it worse was discovering where the credible intelligence had come from. Through the discovery process, we learned that the entire raid was based on a tip from a known unreliable informant who was trying to reduce his own charges by giving police information. He had apparently mixed up my address with another house several streets over. The police had done minimal verification before sending in the SWAT team and demolition experts. The city offered to settle for $50,000, which wouldn't even cover a tenth of the damage. We refused and pushed forward with the lawsuit. The legal process was exhausting. Depositions, motions, counter-motions. It dragged on for over 2 years. The city's attorneys used every delay tactic in the book, hoping I'd get tired and accept a lowball settlement. Meanwhile, I was living with my sister, then in a small apartment I could barely afford, trying to rebuild my life from scratch. The turning point came when we got access to the internal communications between the police officers leading up to the raid. They had actually discussed the possibility that they had the wrong address, but decided to proceed anyway because they'd already called in the SWAT team and didn't want to waste resources. There were even texts between officers joking about getting to use the new explosives they'd been training with. When those communications became part of the court record, the city's defense crumbled. They came back with a much better settlement offer, $1.2 million. Mia thought we could get more if we went to trial, but after 2 years of fighting, I just wanted it to be over. The settlement came with a gag order, which the city's attorneys insisted on. But when I pointed out that news of my house being blown up had already made local headlines, they agreed to a modified version that allowed me to discuss the basic facts of the case publicly, just not the exact settlement amount, which is why I'm being a bit vague about the numbers here. The money helped me buy a new house, not in the same neighborhood, I couldn't go back there, and replace some of what I'd lost. But there are things you can't replace. Family photos, my grandmother's antique clock, the quilt my mom made me when I went to college. Those are just gone forever. The police department issued a formal apology and claimed they'd implemented new verification protocols for raids. But I later heard from a friend who works for the city that nothing really changed. The officers involved were all still employed, some even promoted. What I learned from all this is that fighting for justice is possible, but it's a long, hard road. The system is designed to protect itself, not regular people like me. It took incredible persistence, a great lawyer, and frankly, some luck with the evidence we uncovered to get any kind of justice. I also learned how quickly your life can be upended through no fault of your own. 1 minute you're a regular person going about your day, the next you're watching everything you own go up in flames because someone made a mistake and no one was willing to admit it until they were forced to. If you're ever in a situation like mine, though I hope you never are, don't accept the first answer you get from authorities. Don't let them tell you that destruction of your property is just an unfortunate necessity of public safety. Fight for what's right, even when it feels like you're fighting alone. And maybe consider getting really good homeowner's insurance that specifically covers police damage. Trust me on that one. The next one is an entitled people story. I, 30F, have this close friend from college who I will call Marlon, 31M. We went to college together, graduated together, and we still hang out on our lunch breaks, as our office buildings are just a 5-minute walk away from each other. I have a federal government job, and he works for an investment firm. Back in October last year, I allowed Marlon to move in with me after his girlfriend Paige, 29F, broke up with him and kicked him out of her home. Paige is a Jewish, openly bisexual, liberal tattoo artist who owns her own tattoo parlor with her own body being beautifully covered in tattoos and jet black hair. Unlike Marlon, though, asserts herself, is able to stand up for herself, and is argumentative at times. A little backstory and why they broke up. Marlon comes from a traditional evangelical family from Mississippi. His family moved here to the Bay Area sometime in 2020 during the pandemic so they can be closer to him, or more specifically, so they can get him to better support them. Marlon's mom is on welfare, her dad is on Social Security, and Marlon's brother Ryan, 35M, is unemployed, relying on Marlon and his parents to support them. Marlon's parents and brother live in a 2-bedroom apartment while Marlon himself, as mentioned, now lives in my house but previously lived with Paige. Marlon's family is toxic, treating him with little to no respect, constantly criticizing him while coddling Ryan. They find reasons to gang up on him, criticize him, and ridicule him despite the fact Marlon is the only one in their family to have ever gone to college, pays for their rent, pays their groceries, their internet, their shopping expenses, etc. During their relationship, Paige and Marlon had this rule that they won't get involved in each other's family matters, provided it does not directly affect them. Paige has repeatedly expressed her concerns to Marlon about his family and how his family treats him, but she opted not to push the matter any further because of their agreement and the fact at the time, as Marlon's family weren't directly interfering with Paige's life. Paige has also generally tried to avoid contact or communication with Marlon's family as she's sickened with the way they treat him. When she tries to stand up for Marlon, Marlon himself shushes her and tells her off for raising her voice to his parents. Additionally, in one of the few times Paige has actually met his family, she got into a fight with Marlon's parents due to Marlon's mom making snide remarks about her tattoos and demanding that Paige take down the pride flag, Ukraine flag, and BLM banner from her parlor. Marlon's parents also don't like the fact Paige owns her own home after inheriting it from her grandfather. This is because his parents believe it's emasculating that a woman should own her own home and business. Separately, Marlon also previously once told me how his parents don't like the fact that Paige is Jewish, as they will consider accepting her if she removes all her tattoos, again which covers a lot of her body, stops being Jewish and live the same traditional evangelical life they raised Marlon and Ryan with. They basically wanted Paige to convert and become a trad wife. Marlon did a sucky job at standing up for his ex, as Marlon tried to remedy this by sheepishly asking her to try covering up her tattoos and taking down the flags from her parlor as a compromise to keep the peace. She refused to do so and threatened to break up with him if he kept pushing it. Note that Marlon himself is a genuinely kind, intelligent, and supportive person who was there for me during a difficult time in my freshman year. When his family aren't around, he does thrive as very much his own person, but since his family moved here to California and get back in his life, it's like they just suck the life out of him. Me, Paige, and his other friends have also talked to him about this, urging him to cut them off, but he's just so desperate for their approval and validation that he won't listen. He just keeps saying things like, maybe if I try a little harder, or they're going to change soon. After a while, it just becomes pointless to even ask. Things changed when Marlon's family started demanding more money from him due to his mom's credit card debt and shopping habits, as well as the fact Marlon's parents used a lot of the allowance Marlon gave them to travel across the country going to campaign rallies during last year's presidential election. When Marlon wasn't able to give his parents any more money, they then went after Paige, trying to contact her and demanding that as their son's girlfriend, she had to pitch in to support them. Paige just tried to ignore them at first, but things reached a breaking point when Marlon's mother and his brother Ryan came into her parlor demanding she give them money. According to Paige, they believed that as she's his girlfriend, whatever is hers is also Marlon's, and whatever is Marlon's is theirs, with Marlon's mom screaming that they need money to pay her debts. Paige then called 911 when Ryan jumped the counter and started trying to pry open the cash register. However, as she was on the phone, Marlon's mom punched Paige in the face and started trying to grab the phone from her. Apparently, the barber, who's friends with Paige, across the street saw the commotion that was happening in Paige's parlor, so the barber and two of his patrons came over to try and help her. The barber and his friends managed to subdue Ryan, and Paige finished her call with 911 as Marlon's mom started screaming at them, calling the barber, who was pinning down Ryan, the N-word and calling Paige a Jewish crack worry. Marlon's mom and brother were arrested, with Paige telling officers that she was pressing charges as Ryan did just try to rob her place, and Marlon's mom beating Paige did cause her to have a bleeding lip and mild concussion. As for my personal relationship with Paige, we're just acquaintances. We met a couple of times at social events, including Marlon, and do have each other on both Facebook and Instagram, but that's about it. After Marlon talked about their breakup just out of curiosity, I did message Paige and asked for her side of the story as well. She asked me to meet up with her at this tea house in Union Square and told me what happened, basically filling in what Marlon left out. Paige went on to tell me that after she pressed charges and moved to file a restraining order against Marlon's family, Marlon practically started begging her to withdraw her statement, withdraw the restraining order, tell the police she made it all up, despite the fact there was security camera footage which she gave to police, and to just make peace, as he didn't want to lose his family. Paige said that Marlon didn't even ask if she was okay or apologize for their actions. Because of this, Paige broke up with Marlon right then and there. Marlon did beg her to not leave him, but Paige reminded him that he consistently kept picking his family over her. He's repeatedly failed to support her and that she cannot safely be in his life if his family are in his. I thanked Paige for sharing her side of the story and apologized for his actions, to which she assured me none of this was my fault. However, before Paige left, as I did take in Marlon to let him move in with me, Paige then took my hand and warned me to keep my distance from his family and warned me of Marlon's mom's weird obsession with having grandchildren. When I got back to my house, as by this time he was already staying with me, I admittedly snapped at Marlon, demanding that he apologize to Paige for not supporting her and to stop trying to beg her to get back with him, which he eventually did a couple months later. I then talked to Marlon about trying to at least set boundaries with his family, as he won't cut them off completely, pointed out that he earns more than I do, but yet he can barely support himself as he's basically supporting 3 adults and paying for their debts, their rent, their groceries, and legal bills on his income alone. And he's lost not only a couple of other friendships, but even his girlfriend of 3 years, Paige, because of his relationship with them. He seems to have gotten it, but is still having trouble setting boundaries, and yes, he's still paying their debts and bills. In case you were wondering, I live in my childhood family 4-bedroom home, which they bought in the 90s. My parents moved up to Seattle 2 years ago, allowing me to live here provided I'm able to take care of the house expenses myself. Fast forward to today, it's been 7 months since Paige broke up with Marlon. He is still living with me. We're still friends, but despite that, I'm also requiring him to contribute to household expenses like groceries and contributing to the water bill as he is living with me. A couple nights ago, I was in my living room watching Netflix when Marlon asked me if I'd be willing to go out with him on like an actual date. Back in college, we did on a few occasions talk about the possibility of dating, as in cases where his family is out of the picture. He is a genuinely nice guy, and we do spend a lot of time with each other, but nothing came out of it at the time. I then paused the movie to have a serious talk with Marlon, bluntly telling him that if it were just him, by himself, I would be open to it, as when his family is out of the picture, he is a genuinely nice guy and reliably supportive. However, I did point out how almost all of his salary goes to supporting 3 unemployed adults, his family, and I reminded him what happened with Paige. That said, I asked that if, big if, we did get together, get married, and have kids, how would he support our family while supporting his parents and brother? Would he set boundaries with his parents? Because previously, when Paige and I did urge him to set boundaries with his family, he failed. And lastly, I asked him if we were together, would his parents expect me to support them as well? Additionally, I'm mixed race, as my mom is white and my dad is Indian, and Catholic, albeit not very religious. That said, me being non-white may be a problem for them, and I don't share a lot of their views. Marlon just said things along the lines of he would do his best to try to balance things, and he'd only expect me to occasionally help out his parents as a compromise to keep the peace. He also tried reassuring me by saying they wouldn't mind me not being white provided I agree to live by their rules, at least when they're around. Taking a deep breath, I sighed, and I told him that unless he fully goes no contact with his parents, not only won't I date him, but that any future relationship he has will be doomed to fail due to how overly involved they are in his life. I then got up and went to bed with the 2 of us not talking about his parents or the 2 of us dating since that night. Additional information and mini update. For clarification, no, I never intended to realistically plan to date or enter a romantic relationship with Marlon. He and I did talk about it yesterday, and we agreed that while he is attracted to me, he also doesn't think it'd be a good idea for us to date, mainly because of my skin color and that being a problem for his mom. Apparently, he briefly mentioned the possibility of us date to his mom, who immediately shot it down because I was too brown for her. One of the very few times that racism actually worked in my favor, I guess. Also, Marlon is still missing Paige, and he told me that he's been so thinking about trying to get back with her. I reminded him that not only should he leave Paige alone, but that given his situation, unless he gets serious help first and cuts his parents out of his life, getting into another relationship would be the worst possible thing he can do. Lastly, yes, Marlon and I do have a written month-to-month lease. He does pay me rent monthly, albeit a small amount compared to other properties in the market, and if I were to cancel its renewal, I'd need to give him 30 days notice. I, along with a couple of our other mutual friends, have been urging him to find his own place and try to at least do things for himself, hoping that it'd at least start giving him the confidence to start breaking away from his parents, but IDK. Update. This is a follow-up to my original story from last month, and I'm not sure where to begin because of how messed up this has all been. I should probably rewind and explain how things got to this point. So, after Marlon's ex Paige, 29F, broke up with him back in October last year, Paige and I have actually started talking. We have become friends and have started going to the gym together. Paige has also recently started dating a guy from our gym, who I'll call Virgil, 33M. Turns out Paige and Virgil happen to have gone to the same high school, although a few years apart. In the 7 months since Paige broke up with Marlon, 31M, he's been slaving away trying to support his freeloading family. He's basically been a wreck without Paige, coupled with the constant belittling he gets from his family, specifically about him not earning enough. He also went on to say that he missed Paige supporting and comforting him, which she'd usually do every time he had a negative interaction with his family. Despite me and our friend group trying to encourage Marlon to just move on from her, Marlon has kept wanting to talk to Paige to try and get her to come back to him. Throughout the 7 months they've been separated, Marlon has tried coming over to Paige's home and parlor to try and talk to her, but she kept shutting him down and Marlon stopped doing that, at least up until recently, after Paige threatened to call the police and get a restraining order against him if he showed up to her place one more time unsolicited. Marlon has also complained about not being able to support his family's increasing financial demands, debts, medical bills, and shopping habits. Additionally, Marlon's mom has been badgering him and his brother about her wanting to have grandkids. That said, as some of you have commented in my previous post, yeah, I'm pretty convinced that one reason Marlon wants Paige back, or to a lesser extent, be with me, is because he needs someone to help him support his family as well as to serve a buffer between him and them, as well as being like an emotional support person for Marlon himself. In late March, Marlon found out that Paige had a new boyfriend as she's dating Virgil, causing Marlon to panic. He went on a rant saying that he doesn't want to lose Paige, and I reminded him that she already broke up with him, so he and her are done now. Despite this, Marlon did try texting, calling, and messaging Paige repeatedly, even creating new accounts to do so, as he just wants to talk to her and that he believes they can still talk things out. But I told him to stop trying to contact her. I even showed him a video message Paige sent me to show to him in which she explicitly told him to stop contacting her. Fast forward to Saturday, May 17th, I took time off work and was away from home as I went on a date with this guy I met online who I'll call Jack, 55M, as he took me to his cabin up in the mountains for a week. While there, I received a notification that someone was at the door. It was Marlon's parents demanding to speak to Marlon. I'm guessing Marlon was away from home at the time because he clearly didn't answer. So I told them through the doorbell camera that Marlon was probably at work or something and asked what they wanted. Marlon's parents basically went on this rant about how disappointed they are in their son for not earning enough to provide for them, as well as them needing more money to pay for Marlon's mom's legal bills, gambling addiction, and medical bills. Marlon's dad also mentioned that he needs Marlon to sign on to and pay for a Denali pickup truck he wants to buy, as the truck Marlon's dad bought himself just got repoed. Marlon's mom then asked if I was dating or sleeping with Marlon. I told her no, that there is nothing is happening between me and him. Plus, I also mentioned to her that Marlon told me that she didn't want me dating her son because I am too brown for her liking, so that shouldn't be a problem anyway. Marlon's mom then responded saying that at this point, due to her age and ailing health, she just wants to have grandkids, even if they are mixed race. I caught my breath and just reminded her that I'm just Marlon's friend, and legally speaking, I am his landlord, so that's it. She then said that if Marlon and I do have SX, and if I got pregnant she wants to name our baby, then they left. I was speechless, but also felt weirdly sick from that. On Friday afternoon, as Jack and I were leaving, and I turned it back on, had to conserve battery as I didn't bring a charger and wanted to avoid distractions, to find multiple missed calls and messages from Marlon and Tiffany, 30F. Jack dropped me off home, and as I got inside my house, I found Marlon's room completely thrashed, as well as the living room to a lesser extent, and him just sitting there on the couch looking more miserable than before. I asked what happened, and basically his parents came back over to my place. Marlon opened the door for them, and they basically berated him again for not earning enough money to pay for their medical bills, debts, etc. This basically ended in Marlon agreeing to take out a loan to help finance his family, as well as Marlon and his dad going to a dealership for him to sign on to a truck Marlon's dad wanted. When Marlon got home, got so frustrated that he started smashing up the rooms. I then called back Tiffany, who's a close friend of me, Paige, and Marlon, and asked her to come over. Tiffany and I then talked to Marlon, comforting him but also urging him again to cut off his parents. Tiffany pointed out that before Marlon's parents came here, Marlon was happy, confident, had a happy and stable relationship with Paige, was doing well at his job, but now he's just a mess. I then also told Marlon about the doorbell conversation I had with his mom, and how his parents are now indirectly starting to affect me as well. Marlon apologized and said he'll try to take care of it. Tiffany, who does come from a wealthy family, did offer to pay for Marlon to go to therapy, but Marlon refused, with him saying that he probably just needs to try something else to win over his parents, with Marlon still justifying their action by saying they're misunderstood. I was going to point out that his family seems to have no sense of boundaries, lack basic human decency, and have no self-control, but at this point, trying to tell him this right now seemed pointless. Tiffany and I then cleaned up the mess in the living room, while Marlon cleaned up his room. Later last night, I spoke with Tiffany and Paige on what we can do. Paige recommended something about trying to reach out to his other relatives who may be willing to support him. I'm leaning towards evicting Marlon from my family home, but I don't want to do that just yet, until we could find somewhere for him to stay. I'll post an update if anything significant changes.